Learning objects are awesome.
Did you know that learning objects have a historical basis outside of education?
Yes, I know that Memex, Xanadu, Ticket and Plato were precursors to reusable learning objects.
Learning objects are awesome because they are reusable. Also, they function well when they are reusable across technological systems. That is called interoperability.
Yes. Much of the work surrounding learning objects has focused on non-educational details. I like Wiley's overview because it is not connected to a single instructional approach.
So, let's talk about learning objects. They are discrete, addressable chunks of content that can be reused in a variety of instructional scenarios.
Oh, I know this. There are 3 types of learning objects: content, strategy, and discourse.
You are very smart. Tell me more about content objects while we go back to base.
They are self-contained chunks of information. Most of the time, they contain both the content to teach and the strategy to teach it. Isn't that interesting?
Yes, it is. Reuse and repurpose are also important terms to know. Reuse means taking a learning object in its original form and using it somewhere other than where it originated. Repurpose means making modifications to a learning object before reuse.
That reminds me, David Wiley calls this the reusability paradox. The instructional usefulness of a learning object is inversely proportional to its reusability.
So, the simpler an object is, the more easily it can be reused. The more instructionally sound and specific it is, the more difficult it is to reuse. That makes sense.
We should also discuss strategy objects, which are ways to teach the content. They are purely logic, containing procedures, processes, and patterns of instruction.
So to use an analogy from computer science, data would be the content object and the algorithm would be the strategy layer, the way the data is delivered.
That is correct. What about discourse objects?
A discourse object is a special type of strategy object whose content is not created and inserted by instructional designers, but by the learners themselves.
So they are opportunities for learners to interact with each other. Would a wiki be a good example of a discourse object?
Yes. A discourse object that is very chaotic and has very few constraints. A discussion forum is another example of a discourse object that is more constrained.
So there are 3 types of learning objects: content, strategy, and discourse. The content object is what the instructor is trying to teach. The strategy object is how they teach it. The discourse object is the way the learners interact with each other.
But, how do these change instructional design?
That is a good question. The answer is that they don't. Learning objects just provide instructional designers a new way in looking at their practice.
So learning objects, such as open educational resources, just provide something for instructional designers to consider. Like how easily can the content or method be used?
Yes, and scope and sequence. Plus, the development of OERs makes learning objects more usable as they are able to be localized.
Localization may be the area of greatest impact. It is very exciting.
Oh, that is awesome. So I can design an OER that can be reused or repurposed in any language, using any instructional method?
You've got it. Learning objects can change the world. In fact, this video is a new learning object because it is Creative Commons licensed for reuse.
If you are interested in more information about learning objects, find Dr. David Wiley's chapter in Ray Galuth's Instructional Design Theories and Models Volume 3.
I'm going to go read that right now. Learning objects sound fantastic.